All right, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I see 36 of you out there joining this in-kind proposal workshop. Welcome. So this is the second of two workshop sessions we're running this week. They're exactly the same, so you didn't miss anything yesterday. You'll hear the same things that the audience did yesterday. So let's see, who do we have here with us? Bob Blum is here, your other primary point of contact on your LOIs and proposals. We also have our international program coordinators that I'll introduce you to in more detail as we go. That's Greg Medeski and Steve Ridgway. Knut Olsen sends his apologies. He's on the SCOC, and so he's in the survey evaluation session, but he'll catch up on our notes later. So let's do the usual preliminaries. Let's see. You've almost certainly seen the session web pages already. It's probably how you got here. The Slack channels have been very useful so far. You probably saw in today's Wednesday slot to be in kind channel. There's already some good questions in there for us. We're actually asking you to put questions in there, please, rather than the Zoom chat. It's just easier for us to copy and paste them into our notes so that we can follow up with you later if needed. Greg is going to follow those questions as they come up, and I'll pause every now and then and give him a chance to transmit your questions. So let's see, you've seen this before, but just to remind you, this talk is being recorded, and a good thing too. Do feel free to give thumbs ups and show your appreciation. But mainly, yeah, do please ask questions through the Slack channel rather than Zoom, and we'll deal with them. Aiming to spend about half the time on questions today. As you've seen, we do have a code of conduct for this meeting. Thank you for abiding by it already, and we'll stick to it today as well. Okay, so our goals for today. We thought it would be a good idea to just do a very brief overview of the emerging Rubin LSST in-kind program that all of you are part of, and also look ahead to what's going to happen through the rest of this year. Right now, you just received feedback at the end of July on your ideas for in-kind contributions that you had in your letters of intent. And now our task together is to help you write good proposals due towards the end of September. And so we'll talk about what will happen to those proposals, how to think about them. We also thought it'd be a good idea to try and explain the feedback you've received. That came in two forms. One was a letter, and the other was this handbook that we produced. So we'll try and provide some introduction to the handbook and address your questions about specifics of the feedback. We also thought it'd be good to walk through an example proposal. You've seen your proposal document that you've been given, but also explain what we're going to do with that in terms of treating it as the first step towards an actual data rights agreement. Okay, so we'll assume that you've read parts of the handbook, but not all of it. It's 55 pages and you only got it the other day, but that you already have questions, and we'll spend plenty of time on those. Okay, so where are we with this in-kind program? It turns out around 40 teams from 27 different countries are looking to make in-kind contributions in return for LSST data rights. The letters that you all submitted contain quite a wide variety of ideas for contributions. That was great. And following the US agencies approving them for further development in the winter, the Contribution Evaluation Committee and the Rubin staff have been reviewing those ideas, putting together their feedback in the form of a letter and a handbook. So now we have 6 weeks to turn your LOI ideas into full proposals. Presumably you've been thinking a bit in the meantime about how to do that as well. But we're trying to make the process as efficient as possible. So your team leaders have a Google Doc proposal template that we ask you to work in. There's some benefits to working in that mode, as I'll explain in a second. And you also have a handbook with lots of guidelines for how to put together high value contributions of various categories. That handbook contains several example proposed contributions that are designed to be copied and pasted and then adapted for your purposes. So as I say, your team leaders have a proposal document to work on. Hopefully they'll share that link with you, and you can all get in there and work efficiently. Just to explain the structure of the proposal, we're asking for to stick to a fairly strict format to help us both review your proposal and also turn it into various pieces of a data rights agreement afterwards. So just to walk through that a bit, the first part of the proposal is the usual thing, title and abstract, a list of key people, in particular the leads of the various contributions. And then we're asking you to write one proposal section for each in-kind contribution that you want to make. So those in-kind contribution sections themselves have a particular format, and they're structured basically as a derivation, going from why you are well placed to make this contribution, what you will deliver, and then what you think it's worth in terms of LSST data rights. So there's a background section, an activities section. Deliverables is where you get quantitative about what you would deliver, and then a very short section on what you expect in terms of LSST data rights. The last part is also important, the key personnel. We do need a name of a contribution lead who will be responsible for delivery and reporting on performance of the contribution as we go. We also need to know which group will receive the contribution. We have a concept of a recipient group that I'll explain in a second. So you'll see there's inline instructions in violet italics. You can delete them at the end when you're done with your proposal. In any case, they'll be ignored as we process the proposals. Probably the oddest thing about the template that you've noticed is that we're asking for one sentence summaries as well as longer form paragraphs describing your contributions. That's for good reason that I'll explain at the end. Basically, we're going to take those one sentence summaries, and those are the things that will appear in the initial draft of the data rights agreement. Okay, so like I say, it's a derivation. It's interesting that we're asking you to estimate yourselves the value of each in-kind contribution. That's because this proposal is something like an opening bid. What we'll do through the fall and winter is review your proposals and begin a negotiation of a data rights agreement. So that's why you can think of it as a bid. How will the review process work? Well, once we get your proposal submitted on September 25th, the CEC, the evaluation committee, will review them and then advise the Rubin director, that's Bob, of each contribution's scientific value. We'll also ask Rubin and NOIR staff to carry out a technical review for feasibility and again advise the Rubin director. And we'll summarize those reviews for you by December 15th, or let's be honest, on December the 15th. In that summary, we'll indicate our counteroffer and also explain any technical or scientific concerns as part of that transmission to you. And that's what we'll take to our management board and the US funding agencies for approval to go forward. So in the new year is when we'll then negotiate the data rights agreements to conversions with you. So we'll work on the text together, hopefully making relatively minor adjustments to what you've already written in your proposal, but also working out the details of the PI values. Okay, so that's how we see the process working through this fall and winter. So how should you think about your proposals? Well, this emerging in-kind program, you can think of it as a large international collaboration. Many of you probably already feel as though you're in a large international collaboration because you've been coming to these workshops for years. Others of you are sort of relatively newer, and I hope you have felt welcome at the PCW this year. But I think it's useful to think about ourselves as in a collaboration, because I do think we'll get the best out of your in-kind contributions if we do all work together to help make them work well. So first thing to say is you're not competing with each other for data rights. The in-kind program is inclusive and collaborative, and we're here to try and help you craft a successful proposal that works well with others as well. So I mentioned that each contribution will need a recipient group. That's basically because we need these in-kind contributions to meet the basic criterion that they should expand the resources available to the US science community. And the way we see of ensuring that is to make sure the contributions are embedded within one of our existing structures such that the US science community can benefit. In practice, it means that in most cases, the whole of the LSST science community will benefit from embedding contributions in this way. So recipient groups could be a science collaboration, for example. It could also be Noir Lab for telescope time contributions or data sets. The EON network, many of you will have seen us encouraging you to get involved with that. We're also setting up some specific coordination groups to help you work together, and also with the observatory and the science collaborations to work effectively with these in-kind contributions. So an example of that is the photometric redshift coordination group that is being stood up this summer. Another one is an IDAC coordination group that will help those of you interested in providing computing resources, again, work together as part of a collaborative network. So we have staff at Rubin Observatory to help you get connected and work up these proposals. These are the international program coordinators. At the moment, we have 3 of those, Steve Ridgway and Knut Olsen from Noir Lab, and Greg Medeski from SLAC. And specifically, Steve is going to be working on contributions to be embedded at Noir Lab or in the AON network, so telescope time and datasets. Greg and Knut are going to coordinate this IDAC coordination group. And then Greg and I will work on software development, coordination, and also interactions with science collaborations. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the feedback you just received from us. On July 31st, you got a somewhat formal letter which contained terse but direct guidance on the specific ideas that you wrote about in your LOI. And in that, we included suggested recipient groups, should you want to turn any of those LOI ideas into proposal sections. We also sent you this 55-page handbook. That came out of the CEC's work through the winter and spring. From the start, they were determined that you get homogeneous and fair feedback across all teams. And the result of that way of thinking was this handbook, which we hope will provide uniform guidance and put everyone on a level playing field. So what we'll do in the next few slides after a pause is just look at the different kinds of in-kind contribution. We can categorize them 6 ways. We'll go through each category and try and explain some of the feedback that you've received, either from the handbook or that you'll have seen in your letters. So we'll go through telescope time and active follow-up programs, talk about data sets, and we'll talk about software development effort, IDACs and computing resources, briefly touch on contributions to construction, commissioning, or operations, and then the new thing that you saw in the feedback, which is to do with program management. Okay, so before we jump into explaining the guidelines and the feedback, let's see if there are questions on any of this sort of general remarks at the start. And I'll ask Greg if he's seen any general looking questions related to these first few slides.
Okay, let me just take a quick look. I guess there's one that you already answered. Are all unkind contributions needed to be embedded in a recipient group and will work close with science collaborations we're members of? Do we need to secure a formal endorsement of our proposal from the relevant science collaboration, or is that something you arrange?
Good. So in some cases, we're asking you to get endorsements for your proposed contributions, and I'll try and remember to flag these as we these specific kinds of contribution as we go through the next few slides. But where an endorsement is needed, yeah, we're asking you to reach out and get that. And that's partly to minimize the amount of traffic going through the central coordination, but it's also because we're trying to encourage collaboration between groups, and the collaboration between your teams as contribution providers and the recipient groups is a particularly important collaboration that we want to go well.
All right. Now there's a question from Adriano Fontana, and it's a very general question. It goes as follows. Understandably, there is some directionality in the process on your side, weighing factors, etc. This might eventually reduce the value of the final agreed value of the contribution, hence the number of PIs. Would you recommend proposing more than what the partner aims for? I mean, partner aims for NPI ships. Would you recommend for proposing contribution for F times NPI ships with F greater than 1? If so, what's appropriate F? I'm not quite sure if I fully understand, but maybe you can follow that, Phil.
I think I do. I think Adriano is asking a proposal strategy question.
Oh, right, exactly.
Yeah, which many of you will recognize. So I think what I would say is the first thing to do is to try and make good estimates of these weighting factors yourselves. So I think there is enough information in the handbook for you to make a reasonable estimate where one is needed. And that's certainly something that we at Rubin can help you make if needed. Once you have that rough estimate, then I agree there's some sort of strategy on your part as to how much to propose in order to guard against contributions being weighted less highly in the end. But I think you'll be able to do that better after taking a first pass through the estimates. And like I say, we're quite keen to help you make good estimates because we want to minimize the amount of back and forth in the negotiation.
All right, there is another question which I think is very similar to what we've heard yesterday from Andres Plaza. He asks, the proposal workshop for those groups who submitted LOIs last year, who heard back from Rubin and who are planning to formally apply to data rights via in-kind contribution, correct? I was wondering, will there be another round of something like this, LOI, then feedback, then formal application in the future for international groups that did not or could not submit LOIs last year?
Yeah, so I think there will be. We haven't planned one yet because we have our hands full with all of your teams, the ones that submitted LOIs. But I think we do envision doing at least one other call. Maybe not next year, it could be the year after, but that would be to try and catch any remaining teams that weren't involved in the process this year. I actually think there probably aren't many out there, but we do want to be inclusive to them if we can. The other thing maybe related to say to that is that there will definitely be possibility to expand your data rights agreement as we go. So if you pick up other institutes within your country or more PIs within your institute, then it will be possible to amend the data rights agreement to make more contributions in return for more PIs. So if you're in that particular situation, you can think in terms of first establishing a data rights agreement and then building on it as we go through the years.
Okay, here's another question from Julia Schwand. If one item in the list of in-kind contributions is potentially useful to more than one recipient group, should we include them in the same session or create different sessions containing specific information regarding each recipient group? I think that's an easy one to answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you want to make one single proposal section describing the contribution you want to make. But I agree that there could be times where there's more than one recipient group. And so I think you write one section, but reach out to multiple recipients.
All right, there's one from David Buckley. Will it be possible to add to the existing proposed contributions not originally included in the LOIs, so not with an LOI code? I think the answer is probably yes.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, we're open to new ideas for sure. I'm sure you've been thinking more about things you can do, and reading the handbook will probably, give you more ideas for things you can do. So all I would say is, yeah, feel free to include new ideas that weren't in your LOI. Just please do follow the guidelines in the handbook, follow the examples and so on when working up those proposed contributions. And if you need help with identifying the appropriate recipient group, just get in touch and ask, and we can help with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one from Sirhut Moore. How often do you expect amendments to the data rights agreements? I suppose this will not be a continuous process, but once a year or something like that.
Yeah, so I'll come to this on a later slide, but we're envisioning something like an annual reporting cycle, and so along with that would be something like an annual opportunity to amend your data rights agreement. I hope in many cases there won't need to be much amendment, but we will need to be somewhat flexible about that. I mean, inevitably there'll be some contributions that don't work out so well, and you'll want to do something different. You may want to do something different for your own purposes as well. So we'll be open to amendments and have in mind an annual cycle.
Right. Okay. From Gonzalez Alma, there is a question. In page 25 of the handbook, it says, due to diversity conditions of proposing groups and funding sources, we do not distinguish between permanent staff or temporary staff and exchange rate. I understand this means either permanent or temporary staff can lead a proposal. The example also shows it. But does it imply that temporary staff could be considered PI if data rights are approved?
Okay, so good. We should be clear to separate the two roles, contribution lead from PI. So PI is someone who has LSST data rights, and they are expected to have up to 4 so-called junior associates with them as part of their data rights. And it's up to the proposal teams to decide who are the PIs, who gets the data rights. And we'll be looking to the proposal team leads to provide us with a list of people that we actually give accounts to at the data access centers. So that's the PIs. The contribution leads are the people responsible for actually delivering the contribution. And they may or may not be PIs. They could be, as you say, they could be temporary staff in some cases, but it is a position of some responsibility. They would be the ones reporting on progress of the contribution. I imagine in many cases they will need data rights in order to make their contribution, but it's not required. So I hope that's clear. The proposal team decides who the PIs are once the data rights are awarded. And then the contribution leads need to be listed up front as responsible for delivery and reporting on the contributions.
All right, I think the rest of the questions are more specific, so maybe we can continue, Phil, and then I'll, when we stop, I'll ask those questions then.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Greg. And all your questions, those were good ones. Okay, so telescope time. Roughly speaking, big telescope time is high priority as evaluated by the CEC. Small telescope time also has some great potential, but we do expect it to come in via the AON. So you'll see in the handbook, the CEC has identified 2 flavors of telescope time contributions. One is open time for USPIs to propose for, and the other is a so-called active follow-up program. So we expect the open time would be allocated through a NOIR Lab TAC. For an active follow-up program, that would be executed by the facility staff and then reduced data products returned to the USPIs. The target lists for those follow-up programs would again be competed by a NOIR Lab TAC, at least by default. For the integration into the Astronomical Event Observation Network, that's AON, we're requiring that for small telescopes, so apertures less than 4 meters, also recommending it for bigger facilities as well. This is, I think, something that will be good both for the LSST science community and also for your own facilities to be integrated in AON. It's one of these collaborative networks that will allow you to be more efficient and more effective at making good use of your telescope time. So how to estimate PI data rights value of telescope time? The best way we could come up with was to ask you to estimate the total operational cost of your own facility. So not construction costs or costs of instruments or anything like that, but just the operations cost per night, multiplied by the number of nights being offered. But then to multiply that by a weighting factor that captures the scientific value of the data. Now, this weighting factor is described in the handbook. I would guess that you could make a rough estimate of it, but it would have to be very rough. And so to help you with this, and also to help review of your proposal, we're asking for some specific data about your observing facilities and your plans for the active follow-up programs. We're asking for that via a telescope and dataset evaluation form. You may have spotted this in your proposal documents. There's a little space for a link to it. In 2 slides time, I'll show you what this looks like and explain a bit more about it. But once we have that information about your facility, the CEC can provide a weighting factor to help you design your proposal. So do we have questions about telescope time, Greg? I think there were a few.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them. Sorry, I was muted because there was outside. Quite a few. Okay, first of all, maybe we can start with one that was submitted already yesterday from Adriano Fontana. I have the impression that the requirement that the telescope time goes through EON services can be difficult to be met in cases when we own telescope time but not the infrastructure. A typical case is GTO time at ESA telescopes, but also in other cases. Can you comment on this? And I think there's a very similar question that came from Hiranya later on. So go ahead, Phil, maybe you can actually respond.
Yeah, so when we were writing the guidelines, we were aware that some of you have constraints on what you can and can't do with telescope time. I think the best thing to say is we might just have to treat that on a case-by-case basis. So we'd really like to see telescope time come in through AON, but there may well be ways to help you contribute telescope time via other means, and that's something that that we can work with you on. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Steve or Bob, if you're out there.
I agree. I'm sure we have alternates we can work around with in special cases. Let's talk about it.
Great.
Okay, I think the next one would be from Hiranya Paris. One of them is something that you probably already covered. When she says it's not our telescope, so we cannot guarantee full EON implementation and so on and so forth. So that's fine. So in a case of above agreement is acceptable, it is also okay to impose a restriction on the type of targets, e.g. extragalactic transients or supernova classifications, but not open up to all science, CV, AG, and GRB, to not get into conflict with the local TAC. Should we ask an local ASR LSST or Rubin science collaboration to endorse such a scheme? And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's think. So that's an interesting, another interesting kind of constraint that you're under. And you know, as Steve was saying, I'm pretty sure we can work around that one way or another. In terms of needing an endorsement from a science collaboration, you may not. If the constraint is just handed to you by your facility, then it may be that we don't need an endorsement for that. I see Bob just flicked on his video, so he's probably got something to say.
Yeah, I support what Phil said, but I would be a little more cautious. I think traditionally when Noir Lab and now what will be Rubin as part of the Noir Lab have worked out telescope time exchange. We try not to have any kind of science constraints on the time. So what I would say is, I think you're free to propose anything, and if you have certain constraints that you think you have to deal with, let us know what they are. But there will be some evaluation on that. And of course, any telescope time that comes with constraints on it is less valuable than any time that's freely allocatable for any science for the U.S. community.
Okay, Greg.
Okay, now there's another question from Hiranya that specifically talks about the responses. We would like to release our spectra for LSST alerts directly through TNS within 48 hours for LSST alert triggers from the LSST community. Is that not better than providing them to a single USPI? So I'm not quite sure what respond to this.
Yeah, that does sound better. I'm not sure this was a use case that the follow-up subcommittee discussed, was it, Steve? But it sounds like a promising idea.
Right, it starts to move into a different realm from general availability of a facility to a kind of a service observing follow-up data delivery. You know, it's a different case rather than delivering data to a PI.
Yeah, but certainly something that sounds like it could be valuable. So I think this might be one to take offline and look at the details of with you, Hiranya.
Phil, there is a question that pertains to the earlier section of your presentation, but it just appeared on the screen now. So maybe it would be worthwhile to address it. Tim Holt is asking, are the PI rights linked to the institution/proposal or to the individual? And are they transferable?
It's the former and no. So the data rights go to the institution that signs the agreement. And then we're looking for the team to allocate those data rights. We do recognize that there'll be some individuals that end up through this program making significant contributions, basically in their own time, or using some of their own career time to do this. And so we're looking at possible ways to help those people, especially young people who make that investment, make those contributions. We're looking at ways for them to be able to take data rights with them, but we only just started looking at that. But just to let you know, I think I hear your concern and we're working on it.
Okay, so I think this is pretty much all regarding telescope time and EON.
Okay,
so go
great,
on.
thank you. Let's keep going then. Okay, so related to telescope time datasets. These can be very valuable, but they do need to come with support, and how valuable they are depends on circumstances. So there's quite a bit written in the handbook about datasets. It's worth reading carefully if you're considering going down this way. So datasets we're interested in can be, well, they're external and typically proprietary. External, they can either be historical or contemporary, taken in the past, or being taken now or planned for the near future. The value of a data set will be determined by the operational cost of the telescope time needed to make it. So consistent with the telescope time contributions on the previous slide. And again, there'd be a multiplicative weighting factor coming from the CEC that accounts for how much new science is enabled by that data set, among other things. In terms of supporting data sets, we do need all data sets contributed to come with a certain amount of support, both documentation and so on, but also some willingness to provide active human support for their use. We'll also need to know where the data set is going to reside, where it's going to be hosted and served from. The best will be at one of the Rubin IDACs, so that it can be used by all LSST data rights holders. If you do have a specific IDAC in mind, for example, the one that you're proposing, then you should say that in the proposal and get some endorsement from that team to say that they're willing to host this data set. I imagine in most cases you probably don't have an opinion on that, but just in case you do. Last thing to say about data sets, Datasets as a category includes so-called value-added catalogs, but these come in two flavors, as the handbook explains. The first is a value-added catalog that you might make by joining an external dataset with an LSST table to make it even more useful. In that case, the value of the dataset would come from the telescope time that went into it. Another kind of value-added catalog is one where alternative or additional measurements are made from the LSST images themselves, and the result being a new data set. These are things that we expect many LSST users to be just making as a matter of course and sharing with the rest of the community in some, hopefully many cases. But if you are thinking about this kind of value-added catalog, we note that really what you'd be contributing is not the data set, not the catalog itself, but rather the software to make the catalog. And so you should think in terms of proposing specific software development effort to make those value-added catalogs. Okay, so Greg, let's pause and see if there are questions about data sets. Oh, you're muted, Greg, sorry.
Thanks. Okay, so I think that the first question will be probably the one that I noticed is very relevant. It's from Ariel Gulbar. He says, with regard to value-added data sets, is there any kind of embargo against publishing science papers based on these prior to handing it to the Rubin data facility?
So I don't think we wrote about this explicitly in the handbook, but my view is that the data sets ought to be provided to the LSST science community promptly. You could argue that if you first publish the data set before providing it, it would certainly be a less value to the community than otherwise. I mean, the counter argument is that in publishing it, writing about it, you're providing a form of documentation. So I think this is something I might have to take offline and consult the CEC about, because I can see, pros and cons to it being published before being provided. I don't know if this is something you've thought about, Bob.
I think you've captured that we need to think a little bit more about this, Phil. I mean, there are certain obvious cases, right? If there were a contributed data set that an international was going to contribute, and they already had data rights, and they somehow use that data set and LSST data to write scientific papers, and then contributed it to the community, that would clearly not be good. So I think it really comes down to what does it mean by publishing the data set. I mean, even a data set that was widely used by proprietary or closed collaboration internationally and then offered, I think we'd have to consider really carefully what that meant as far as scientific opportunity for the US. That scientific opportunity might be reduced, but not, zero. So that's something we should consider.
Yeah. So yeah, let's take that offline and work on that, because I imagine there could be several groups that have constraints on their data through their collaborations with other facilities and so on. So good, thank you.
One more question from Adriano, specifically about the added values catalogs. In the section about added value catalogs, page 15, you mentioned that the labor to make the catalog is not taken as a contribution. I would challenge this statement. It is true, as you say, that a given survey would have done the catalog anyway, but the work of cross-correlating with LSST catalog in a sensible and clean way is sometimes not trivial, at least not always, and should be factored in when appropriate as a software development. So that's a really interesting question that might segue to the next section. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, so what you could be looking at there is a contribution that is somehow both data and software. We should take a look at that and together and analyze it a bit. But one outcome could be that it's actually two contributions. a software development one, and a dataset one. So there could be special cases like that as exceptions to the guideline in the handbook. Okay, let's keep moving. We got 20 minutes left together or so.
Yeah, I think that's fine. There's not that much. So go ahead.
Okay, so I mentioned we need some information from you about your observing facilities in order to review them and also help you estimate the value of your contributions. And so we're going to do this via a telescope and dataset evaluation form. So excitingly, you won't be given your own telescope and dataset evaluation form. We're going to ask you all to collaborate on the same shared spreadsheet. So remember I said we were a large international collaboration. We really are going to be working on this in the same sheet. So we'll use this spreadsheet. It's linked here from the slides, and I'll also send an email out to all the proposal leads explaining this as well. You'll see in that spreadsheet, the idea is to enter a row for each of your proposed contributions and use that row to provide information in various columns that we need in order to estimate the weighting factors. Steve Ridgway is going to be monitoring this spreadsheet and helping out if you have any problems. Our fond hope is that you'll be able to see what each other are doing and learn from that, and that it should be relatively straightforward to fill in this sheet as a result. But remember, you're not competing, you are collaborating in this program. So hopefully this will go well. If for some reason you feel as though you need a separate sheet, do please get in touch, but we're encouraging everyone to try and work in the same shared data collection form. The CEC will do their weight factor calculations in a separate sheet over there, but then we'll use that to get back in touch with you and help with the PI value estimation. So we're hoping to be able to give you feedback on your weighting factors by early September. So again, you should be able to make a very rough estimate to get started, and we should be able to refine that with you in early September. And of course, the sooner you start entering data into that sheet, the sooner we'll be able to get back to you with a value estimate. Okay. There are benefits to being in this shared spreadsheet. There's also a big risk, of course, which is data could potentially get overwritten. So first thing to say is please take care not to overwrite other teams' data. Just work in the row that you've created, please. If we do have accidents, I think we'll be able to go back through the version history and help you recover them. But this will work best if we edit this spreadsheet carefully, please. Okay, so just here's what it looks like when you arrive in that spreadsheet. You'll see 5 tabs. The first one's a README that explains what to do and where. And then there are 2 tabs for entering information about facilities, either optical infrared or radio telescopes. And then there's a couple of tabs for defining programs, either an active follow-up program or a data set that you're looking at making. And then what we'll do in the analysis is use information from both the program tab, the active follow-up, say, and also the facility tab, so an optical infrared telescope, for example. And so in this example I'm showing you here, you can see that the bulge diskia NAOB team are entering information on one row in the active follow-up program tab, and then another row in the OIR telescope tab. And we'll join those together in the analysis. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Please do ask Steve if you get stuck, and you can do that via comments on the cells. Is a good way to go, because then other people will see Steve's answers. Okay, let's keep going. And kind of another category of in-kind contribution you could make, software development effort. So this must be embedded in a recipient group in order for it to meet the criteria and be high value. And essentially, the more directable that effort is, the better. So what do we mean by that? Well, firstly, embedding in a recipient group basically means joining the team. So the recipient group could be a science collaboration, or working group within it, or it could be one of the Rubin operations teams, the algorithms and pipelines teams, for example. There'll also be these coordination groups that I mentioned earlier on. What we're looking for is for software developers to join those teams and be involved, make a work plan with the recipient group. And if they do that, that means that their effort is directable. And basically assured of working on what the group needs. There is another category of software development effort, non-directable. This is where the developer works on what you want them to do. And then we need an additional step to make sure that it really does meet the criteria for an in-kind contribution. So non-directable effort to make specific packages that you come up with, you need an endorsement from the recipient group that product really is high value to the recipient group. And so we can help you with reaching out to recipient groups and so on. We'll also publish the handbook so that everyone's aware of these distinctions, directable and non-directable. So how will software effort be valued? It's basically by time committed. So we're looking in your proposals for you to be specifying how much or how many FTEs, full-time equivalent years of effort you'll be providing as part of this contribution. And then we'll use a standard exchange rate to turn that FTE effort into PI value. Basically, it's 1 FTE year per PI. The exception to that is if you're offering so-called general pooled effort, which is both directable but also deployed by Rubin based on the CEC's advice. That is to say, you don't say, we want to provide software development effort to this particular group, but instead say, hey, we have software development effort that you could place where it's needed. That's considered by the CEC to be particularly high value, and so we'll get a 25% better exchange rate. We think it's valuable because it's a way to make sure we have all the bases covered and make sure all of the LSST science gets done well. Okay, so you're for sure aware of this, but not everyone can or should be developing software. We want to focus on dedicated time spent by computing professionals and skilled postdocs, so I think data scientists. And for a contribution to be high value, typically we'd be looking for at least 50% time working on that contribution. There are some exceptions to this explained in the handbook, but roughly speaking, I think we can all agree that people work best when they're focused on a task, not dividing their time too thinly. And the last point on this slide, you see we're looking for software developers to commit to building and maintaining durable, reusable software in a collaborative way. And all of that is needed to make sure that the software that's provided as part of your contributions is the benefit of that is felt by as much of the US science community as we can. So before I take questions on this, I wonder if there's any comments from Bob or others about software development effort. Cool. Okay, so questions, Greg. You're muted right now.
Okay, so here we go. Question. Sorry, Phil, I got distracted here for a second. Okay. So who is maybe the last one from Hirania, and then I'm going backwards. Who is the recipient group point of contact for the general directable pool or software development effort?
It's me. So Greg and I will be working on this aspect to it. We'll take advice from the CEC as we go, but we'll get started by just collecting together all of you that are interested in making this contribution and help you work through the guidelines.
All right, and then I'm trying to determine whether there is anything regarding software from the earlier multiple questions that people had. Okay, there is again one from Adriano. For directed software development, and even more for general pool, there is a general problem of providing specifications and supervising the work in scientific coding. These processes are difficult to formalize. So that an expert human supervision, such that an expert human supervision is needed. How would you arrange it for resources that are external to your teams? In this sense, I would challenge your statement that the time of faculty senior staff supervising the work cannot be accounted for, as this is needed for the work, and it is at the exclusive benefit of the US Chilean communities. It would be difficult to secure manpower at faculty level without a reward.
So yeah, we had some discussion about this when putting the handbook together. What we're really looking for is for the in-kind contribution itself, we're looking for dedicated time. And so I think it is possible to add small fractions of management or leadership time, provided it really is dedicated to that contribution. We do recognize that postdocs and developers need local supervision as well as remote. But to get to the first part of the question, for directable effort and general pooled effort, we're expecting the work plan for the developer to be made in collaboration with the recipient group. That's a big reason why we're focused on the recipients as an important component within the in-kind program. So we expect the developer to work with the leads and the members of that recipient team in order to write a work plan and then work to it. We would expect them to present progress at regular meetings of that recipient team. So this is a particular aspect of the large collaboration model. I think it will work naturally in most, if not all, recipient teams we've identified. So either teams within Rubin Observatory or within one of the science collaborations. I think it'll be possible to identify a working group where a plan can be developed and then worked to. But I do take your point about local supervision, and so I'm happy to help work through the guidelines on specific sort of management or leadership effort that is dedicated to that contribution.
Then we have a question from Lovro Palaversa, a question related to the general pool of directed effort. How should the international contributors define activities and deliverables in the proposal if they don't know in advance where the effort will be directed?
Right. So the good news here is that it will be easy to write this proposal because we don't need to say very much. The basic deliverable is the effort provided, the time committed by the developer. For general pool development effort, where we don't know yet where it's going to be deployed, we won't be able to say much about the activity other than its dedicated skilled software development effort. So I think what I can do is take an action to work up an example proposal section for this type of effort, which should show you show you explicitly what we're looking for.
Let me add a question. Do you think it would be appropriate to have the proposers write specifically what are the areas of expertise of a person that they propose to participate in this, such that the person is not saddled with doing something that is completely outside of the realm of expertise?
Absolutely, that's a good point. That would be ideal material for the background section of the contribution. But then, as Lova was saying, the activities and deliverables sections will then be quite brief.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. I see on my clock we have about 5 minutes left. So I'll go quickly through the remaining.
Can I interrupt you for just a sec?
Yeah.
There was one question that's kind of related here that I think would be important to answer from Massimo D'Allora about service contributions from science collaborations. It kind of touches on a lot of this stuff, and I know we've talked about it before. And then I don't know exactly how much time we have left, but I think we were trying to get some input on commissioning. Maybe there's no commissioning type questions today, but if there are, we might want to save a minute or so at the end.
It's a basic question about the contribution towards writing of documents. A general question about the efforts already produced within the science collaborations, all the work done going from the leading subgroups and chairing task forces to documents writing and meeting participation will be evaluated somehow in the in-kind proposal. I think that's what you're referring to, right?
That's Massimo's question. Okay, so we tried to specifically address in the handbook and the feedback. Basically, the CC makes a distinction between past contributions to software development that would meet the criteria in the handbook if they were proposed now, and service type work in science collaborations and Rubin, which are not considered as eligible in-kind contributions. But it was thinking that through that actually led us to start exploring alternative ways to enable individuals to obtain data rights on the basis of their service work in the past. And so that's the thing we're working on. But past contributions to in software development, either to Rubin or to science collaborations, those are eligible to be included in your proposal. Okay, let's see. I'll try and pause at the commissioning slide, although it's going to get there in one slide time after this. So just a quick note on IDACs. We're recommending to everybody interested in providing computing resources and in-kind to look at building an IDAC, an Independent Data Access Center, that would sit in a network of IDACs serving the LSST science community with not just Rubin data, but also other data sets as provided. So I think this is an exciting opportunity for people with computing resources. The defining characteristic of an IDAC is that it has Rubin authentication, so allows any data rights holder to log in and work there. But it would also have similar computing environments, uniform database schema, and so on. So making it easy for the users to use the network, but also, we hope, easy for the providers to work together in setting up and maintaining these IDACs. So the main thing for IDAC proposers to do is to read the tech note, RTN 003, which lays out the plan for what these IDACs will look like, and also specifies what you will need in order to qualify as an IDAC. That checklist in the appendix is also something we've reproduced in the example proposal section in the handbook. So do please take a look at that. We recognize that the level of resources provided can vary widely. Only the full IDACs will need to run the Rubin Science platform, although we hope that others will try to do that as well. And so there's a fair amount of flexibility in this planning, and we hope that most, if not all, teams will be able to contribute to this IDAC network. And for all of you who aren't thinking along these lines, hopefully you can see this as an exciting opportunity for LSST Science to have this network of computing facilities. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving, but just to say at this point, if you do have more questions about what you see in the next few slides, please do put them in Slack, and I'll work for the rest of this day going through those questions and providing answers and so on. But I'm aware that we only have a half-hour break after this, and I don't want to take it away from you. Okay, so for those interested in making contributions to construction commissioning operations, you know who you are. We've been working with you either by invitation or other form of direct collaboration. That's why there isn't a lot of material in the handbook for you, but we'll be working directly with you to help you craft this part of your proposal. And then again, we're right at the hour, so I'm afraid questions about this we'll have to handle in Slack. One last thing I do want to say before we all disappear is this new thing that you may have noticed in the handbook or in your feedback letter. We're recognizing that managing your part of the in-kind program is real work. So to keep track of the contributions when they're live, track their performance and solve problems when they occur, we're going to need to have a certain level of reporting going on. That's why we're asking for each contribution to have a named lead who's responsible for its delivery, but also its reporting. And as I said before, we're thinking annual reporting, probably. The IPCs will be assigned to each contribution, and then they'll arrange for the reports to be reviewed, first by the recipient group and then evaluated by Rubin staff or the CEC. We think that there's a role for somebody to help with getting those reports out on time. That's a program manager position. So we're asking each of your teams to nominate a program manager who will dedicate some time to helping the leads make their reports, and then also working with the relevant resource board representative to solve problems. Once the reports have been evaluated by the CEC or by Rubin staff, Bob will take them to the resource board and report on progress of the program in general. The resource board of basically funding agency representatives can then work together to solve problems. And we expect the program manager to be instrumental in getting problems solved. So this is real work. I doubt whether it will be in total, if we add up all of the contribution leads work on reporting plus the program manager effort, I doubt whether it will reach a whole FTE, even in the biggest programs. But nevertheless, for each team, we'll add a bonus PI's worth of data rights in recognition of the program management work that we're going to ask you to do. Okay, so we have reached the end of our time. I encourage you to look through the rest of these slides. Basically, it says that there are examples in the handbook. There's a Google Doc version, which is easier to copy and paste from, and we encourage you to do that. What will happen to your proposal sections? Why are we asking for one sentence summaries? I said that they would go into the initial draft of the data rights agreement statement of work. And there are pictures here to explain how that will happen. And just to leave you with this, we're seeing this as the start of a conversation about your proposals. We're looking to work with you actively through this summer to help you write good proposals. We can do that through email. We can do it through inline comments on your proposal document directly. Could be a good way to work. Do look at the handbook for a directory of contact details for recipient groups to reach out to. Those recipient groups will likely use LSSTC Slack as well as email. And so if you need an invitation to LSST Slack, please do let me know. I can help you get on there. Temporary Science Collaboration membership is also available. I can help you obtain that. And you know that you have the IPCs to talk to, you have the contacts in the directory, and your formal points of contact will remain me and Bob throughout this whole process. So if you do have questions or concerns, please do just reach out and get in touch. Okay, sorry for going a minute over, but I hope this was useful. We'll continue in the Slack channel this afternoon, getting your questions and concerns addressed. All right, thanks very much for attending. I'll go start looking at the Slack channel to see what else we've got there.
Yeah, there's one more question from Hiranya. Maybe I can ask right away, do the in-kind software developers take a PI or JA slot?
Oh, so again, we're detaching the people who do the work from the people who get the data rights. They're logically distinct. So in many cases, they may be the same. It may be that the software developers in particular need to have data rights, and so might need to take up either a junior slot or a PI slot. But it's up to the team to allocate the PIs and the JAs. And it's also up to the team to nominate who will do the work and figure out whether they need to be the same people or not.
Okay, I think that's all that we need that we have time to answer, and everything else is going to, as Phil said, is going to be answered in the Slack channel or in some format of that kind.
Okay, good. Hopefully many people already left because we're in our break time now, but that's good for the rest of the people that stayed. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye now just to make it clear to everyone that they should be going off and stretching their legs and eating and so on. The Zoom workshops are exhausting. Okay, thanks for everyone for attending. It was really good to see you. And we'll be in touch soon.